Hello and welcome. It's India's marquee brand, the symbol of consumer aspiration since the 1980s. Now, after unprecedented violence between workers and managers, there's blood on the factory floor. Who's responsible for the mess at Manesar? And what is the larger import for industrial relations, and how real is the spectre of urban Naxalism? That's the headlines to today's special debate tonight, and I have a very high-powered panel with me. I want to begin by introducing Mr. R.C. Bhargav, Chairman of Maruti Suzuki. Thank you very much, sir. We also have Mr. Adi Godrej, President of CII, Chairman of the Godrej Group. We've got Chandrajit Banerjee, Director General of CII, and Surinder Kapoor, Chairman of CII's Committee on Industrial Relations and also Chairman of the Sona Group. Very close linkages with what's happening at Manesar. With us from the Congress Party is Manish Tiwari, National Spokesperson. We've also got Mr. Sitaram Yechuri from the CPIM. And for a perspective from the BJP, we've got Mr. Rajiv Pratap Rudy. I want to begin by asking Mr. Bhargav that how is it that one of India's best managed companies fails to read the tension simmering beneath the surface? This blows up on the face of Maruti, which has very high management standards. And how is it that no one knew that this was building up? So whose fault is it? You had a lot of time to think about this question. What sort of conclusions are you drawing?
Well, let me first say that we have two plants, Gurgaon and Manesar. Gurgaon is the bigger plant. It has more workers. It has more production. There's been no trouble in Gurgaon at all. Manesar has had trouble last year. It has had trouble this year. All the factors, all the demands which were there last year were fully addressed. They were settled. A good communication system with the workers was established. There were no outstanding demands which were with us from the workers. There was absolutely nothing to indicate that there was any serious simmering discontent. Also, Rahul, if you would allow me to say that in any factory where there has been trouble and violence, it has not been without some incidents happening earlier. We've had no strike notice, no demand notice, no incidents of any kind in the last 8 months. It's just carrying on. And this kind of an incident, which apparently is said to have triggered it off between one supervisor and one worker, happens quite frequently in both Gurgaon and Manesar. It happens, gets sorted out, it's part of the routine business.
Was this pre-orchestrated, premeditated?
No,
was it on the spur of the moment?
My point that I'm trying to make is that there was nothing to indicate that suddenly there was this outburst of violence where without any earlier notice or any earlier inkling to anybody, nobody had this inkling, that people would suddenly get into the mob frenzy and attack not any particular manager against whom they had a grouse or any particular supervisor against whom they had a grouse, but they attacked everybody who was not a worker. It was almost like a class attack that we are workers, we will attack everybody who is not a worker. People just went after these guys. The people who were attacked in the office were one group of people, but that was not all. There were people attacked everywhere. So what do I make out of it? I think what I make out of it is that this was pre-planned. It was pre-planned, I think, by a small group of people. What at one stage people have been talking about some kind of extreme left wing who want whole societies to be changed through virtual chaos creation. And these people gave the incitement to this thing to happen.
So let me just try and get this right. You're saying that your understanding currently is that there was a group of extreme left-wing workers in the Manesar factory who instigated the other workers.
Today we think were extreme left-wing and who incited this whole thing, and it was pre-planned. It was kind of conspiracy which was kept within this small group of people, that's all. But otherwise people don't, any demand for a worker does not lead straight away to breaking the legs and arms of management.
Now that's a very, very important point you're making. You're saying for the first time that the Maruti management believes that this was pre-planned murder, Mr. Yechuri, on the part of certain extreme left-wing elements in the working class who acted as if it was a class act against the management. Kill anybody who's in management, Mr. Yechuri.
Well, Mr. Bhargav says that he didn't say what you were saying. Well,
I didn't say it was a pre-planned murder. I think it was a pre-planned attack
extreme
on the
left-wing
manager.
elements working.
Yeah, you see, the point is I don't know. We don't know what are the really are the facts.
Sure.
You can come to our conclusions or they can come to their conclusions, but the facts will have to be established. The easiest way, and all of us know, whenever accidents happen, it's always the fault of the human error. The person who's supposed to commit the error is dead. The pilot of a plane or the driver of a train accident. But the point is you always blame something or the other. So it's not a question of blaming. The main question, Mr. Bhargav, and what all of us will have to consider is that why did such a situation arise? I mean, it is not a normal occurrence. I mean, something, and it is something which was obviously simmering, which you did not notice maybe. That's a different point. But the question is, where is this breakdown that is there between the workers and the management? And unless you address that question, which I think is a very serious matter in the present industrial milieu in the country. I mean, you have, for instance, the entire attack on the organized working class in terms of permanent employees. You make them casual, you make them contract, you make them temporary, and their insecurity that is brewing and that is what you call accumulating will find such expressions. But nobody can condone or will condone. I'll be the last one to say law and order is law and order. It has to be maintained. There's no question of that. But the question is that the practices that are being followed now are ones that are pregnant with such the amount of discontent that can just keep brewing inside. And get an opportunity, it just explodes. And you have to seriously consider, I mean, I'm addressing it to everybody here. You see, you have a concept in your human resources thing called the CTC, the cost to company. I think you pay on that basis. Unless you change your mindset of treating CTC not as cost to company, but as contribution to company. Unless you change that mindset, I'm afraid you are sitting on a volcano.
You're
Things like this
questioning
will
the
happen.
practices at Maruti and elsewhere. Let me just give some facts. Out of the 3,000 odd workers at Manesar, our research tells us that 2,000 were on contract. Permanent workers get between 16 to 21,000. Contract workers get just about 6,000. Workers say they were provided just 2 7.5-minute breaks, during which they had to travel about half a kilometer to either the canteen or the toilet and get back to work on the dot. If they were late, there were consequences that followed. Mr. Yechuri is questioning the practices being followed on the factory
Rahul,
floor.
I think that what you've given as practice is factually wrong. I don't know where you've got these figures that they have to travel half a kilometer. It's absolute
This is what
rubbish.
some workers have given us on camera as quotes.
Exactly, but that doesn't make it authentic, and you're quoting it as authentic figures.
I'm saying this is what workers
No,
is.
but our object, you're quoting these as authentic. Please give the source that this is unverified information given to you by some workers. It's not true.
No, but the proportion of the permanent to the casual.
The numbers also wrong.
Oh.
It's true that there are about 60% of the workers, a little less than 60%, who are presently contract workers. It's also a fact which nobody brings out that a policy was announced which was known to the union, which is known to the workers, that by March 13, all the contract workers would be moved out of all production areas. We would do away with this policy of contract workers. We are the first company which has made a policy of dealing with this whole contract thing. We do not now intend to have contract workers except for non-value adding activities like sweeping and unloading and loading and that kind of thing. On none of the production activities would we have contract workers. And this was to be done by March 13. They knew it. Contract workers was one of the causes for the strike last year. It was sorted out. This was not an issue, Mr. Yechuri, anymore in Maruti.
Yeah, but look at the whole industry, Mr.
No,
Bhargav.
but I'm saying look at the industry is different.
But even in Maruti also, the proportion, if it's 60% of contract workers.
In Manesar, it's true.
Manesar, it's 60%. And if the plant is based on 60% contract workers, the wage differential between them,
The
working
wages
condition.
given here are also wrong, incidentally.
No,
the numbers are wrong.
No, I'm saying that this is purely from what the workers are saying.
Yeah,
I want
so-
to bring in...
So let me just complete. Today in India, less than 7% of the workforce is organized workers. That is on permanent jobs. Now, can an industry, even for the industry's own future, can anything sustain on that? Does profit maximization mean casualization, contractual labor, or temporary labor? Because we have a vast army of the unemployed, you cannot. I mean, if you start treating them like this, you are, as I said, sitting on an explosive situation.
I want to bring in the Industries Minister of Haryana, Randeep Singh Surjewala, is joining this broadcast. Mr. Surjewala, Mr. Bhargav points to his, what he's picking up from the ground, reflecting that there were a small group of extreme left-wing elements in the union who instigated the workers, and it was a class act to beat up everybody in management. That essentially is urban Naxalism, which was earlier spoken of only as something in the future, something to be worried about. Is that now here staring us in our faces?
See, to call it urban Naxalism is perhaps going too far. The facts as they exist, and so far what has come out from the preliminary investigation is this. A spontaneous accident or incident happens on the shop floor, which is an altercation between a worker and a
You think it was
junior
spontaneous?
Man. See, shop floor arguments happen all the time in industry.
That's what I said.
It's a usual phenomena. I have an argument with my supervisor and he disagrees with me. That's okay. The middle level management mediates, the workers union or their representatives mediate, and the issues are more often than not sorted out without any outside interference. Right. It's a normal
Mr.
phenomenon.
Bhargav says that it was premeditated.
Yeah, I'm coming to that. Now, what happened as a consequence thereof to the first incident does appear to be, and I would agree with Mr. Bhargav, does appear to be premeditated. When mediation was taking place and there was no inclination of any violence or possibility of violence, there is of course some tension in the air, that a group organizes itself and then it becomes a mobocracy, where they take out pillars from which the car is manufactured, and they beat up anybody. In Maruti, the managerial level people from supervisor up to the highest management wears white caps. You beat up everybody. You beat to hit, to break bones, to kill, and finally set the factory premises on fire. I understand and I respect the point that Mr. Yechuri made, that there has to be a better coordination as far as wages are concerned. But it definitely is not provocative enough to bring or set on fire the entire factory, to kill middle level and the higher level management, or at least attempt to kill them, or to demolish the very edifice you are sitting
All right,
on.
let's try
It's
and get some
nothing less than an act of criminality.
Just to put the record straight, Mr. Surjewala, before we came here, I said law and order is an issue which is non-negotiable. That's non-negotiable. There, nobody
But what we're essentially seeing then is the breakdown of relations between the working class and the management at one of India's best-run companies. I want to get a perspective from the outside. Let me go across to CII President, Mr. Godrej. How alarming is this for Indian industries? If this can happen at Maruti, which is such a marquee brand, is there trouble? As Mr. Yechuri says, are we sitting on a volcano, sir?
Well, it's clear that violence of this nature is unacceptable, no matter what the background might be. And I'm not saying the background was negative. I'm only saying that no matter what the background is, violence of this nature and behavior of this nature should be unacceptable. Even if you look at terrorism, if you look at Naxalism in some of our states, there is always some people arguing that this is injustice, this is a situation where people are not treated well. Yes, there are social causes, there are issues, but that doesn't justify violence on an organized scale, under no circumstances. And as a country, as a people, we should not accept it. So to my mind, there are issues with our labor laws, there are issues where competitiveness in industry is affected by labor laws, there may be issues where management-labor relations are not run very well. Overall, I think in most corporations in India today, most of our members, management and labor do cooperate to see that productivity increases. That is the way a business gets competitive. That is the way India can get competitive, and that should be encouraged, cooperation. And if there are issues, yes, there are mediation processes, state governments come into play, our laws, labor laws allow for such mediation. That should be the course. Clearly here, in this case of Maruti, where I am not very knowledgeable about the details of either what happened in Maruti earlier or what happened that day, but from what I can see, clearly it seems to me premeditated, and clearly it seems to me that we should not be on the path that such an incident, such kind of violence, any justification whatsoever.
Manish, what's happened at Maruti is extremely worrying for the reason that if it can happen at Maruti, it can happen pretty much at any much smaller company where the management isn't as careful or the processes aren't quite as strong. What do you make of this specter of urban Naxalism and Mr. Bhargav saying there were extreme leftist groups who instigated this violence?
Well, Rahul, I think we need to use the term urban Naxalism very carefully, because if we loosely bandy such terms about, we are bound to create paranoia. The investigation will unearth as to whether there was a conspiracy and who the conspirators were, which finally led to this unfortunate incident taking place. Allow me to say three things. I think, first of all, I agree with what Mr. Godrej said, that nobody should have any sympathy with this root causes argument, because this root causes argument is a complete non sequitur insofar as justifying violence is concerned. Number two, we should not use Maruti, and what happened in Maruti was extremely unfortunate, as a black brush to tar the entire India story. If you really look at things in a perspective, between the decade of the 90s and the first decade of the 21st century, the number of industrial disputes have come down. The contrarian argument is that 94% of India's workforce continues to be in the unorganized sector. 98% of India's workforce is not covered by any collective bargaining agreements. So therefore, I think there is a need for both government and industry to wake up and realize that, look, human resource, needs to be dealt with a little more sensitively than just consigning it to some manager in the industrial relations department and leaving it to him, to handle what is becoming, because as you said, of the rising aspirational matrix, a very, very volatile commodity.
But the BJP, it seems, Mr. Rudy, in the midst of all of this, wants to politicize it. Some of your spokespeople have gone out and hit out at the state government for being unable to deal with the labour unrest, saying that in the entire Manesar belt, I have a comment here from Nirmala Sitharaman. She says that the state government has not been able to introduce industrial harmony. What do you make, sir, of this spectre of a premeditated attack on management by the workers?
My concern, I will not get into, because he has got too many facts, they have spoken about it. My concern is slightly different. Well, there may be 5,000 employees there, and as he said, that violence is unjustifiable. Problems of the labor not being looked after by the management is unjustifiable. For the left, it is all unjustifiable. So both sides he balances and says that.
Not balancing.
So we do not know how to handle. So this is unjustifiable. This is unjustifiable. So what is the solution now? Now look, here we have a country which has got more than 500 million people in the unorganized sector. Some people get good money. Some permanent employees get about 20,000, 25,000. They are skilled labor, and there are others who get 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. Today from my constituency, if you want, I can send people who would like to come here and work in 5,000 again. So that chapter is being addressed as anyone who gets there should be protected like a government. We have not built up a system where everyone becomes a government, gets protected under all laws, pensions and schemes. Okay. That doesn't happen now, because the way we have run this country for the last 60 years, that has actually not happened. In fact, those numbers have grown bigger and we have not been. So there are factories and investments coming in certain places, and thankfully to Haryana being an NCR region, it's good for the state. No one would like that unrest to be built up. But having said that, can we justify all these actions which the employees have done? Whatever may have been the reason, can we justify it?
Nobody can.
Nobody can.
No, but you're saying
having said that,
it's too early to say that this is extreme left-wing violence. So, Mr. Bhargav, on what basis do you make this comment? Because it's a very dramatic comment.
Firstly,
how do you make this?
Let me first say that when you say that relations between management and workers were poor, I think there's no basis for that statement either.
Yes.
After last year's strike, the first meeting with the workers took place where I went to meet the workers, the managing director went to meet the workers, the two senior most Indian people were present. We had a discussion with the workers, heard all their demands, and we agreed with the workers that there would be a process of regular dialogue to sort out all. Everybody agreed to that. Every month since then, our two senior most officers, the two CEOs now, who they are for administration and production, have been having regular meetings with the workers, unions and others every month. Even on the day of the incident, there were regular discussions going on since the morning. So it was not a breakdown of relations. It was not that management, I think, didn't have relations with them. As far as payments are concerned, I think our workers are, the regular workers are amongst the best 2 or 3 companies in that area. And when negotiations are going to take place, I've assured the workers that they will end up being the best paid workers. The contract worker system will end. The contract, we will have temporary workers who deal with fluctuations, but they will be paid for the same work, the same salary as anybody.
But let me ask you a direct question. So do you believe it was people on the inside in the Maruti workforce who instigated others?
Only because I can't find any near rational reason for what happened. No worker ever destroys the place where he works.
Exactly.
It doesn't happen. It's not in the worker's interest to do it. This incident has caused no benefit to anybody, neither the worker, nor the management, nor anybody.
Mr.
Now,
Bhargav, may I
nobody
ask you a
does a
question?
crime. Sorry, yes,
May
sir.
I ask you a question? And I asked this question to your colleague, Mr. Siddiqui, in a different context. Do you think that possibly Maruti could have erred, in some sense of the word, in not doing proper background checks on the people that they were hiring? Was due diligence not done?
I admit that's a
the
possibility,
wrong kind of
yes.
people got hired.
Sure.
Because if you talk about infiltration, which Rudy rightly said is not a term that we should use loosely, I think then there is a need to revisit the recruitment and hiring practices also.
I think that may be a possibility. Our decision now is that we will carry out a very thorough check of everybody we employ, and we will not open the doors. One of the reasons we did away with contract workers, because contract workers are provided by contractors. We have no say in the selection of those people. We don't know who they are. We don't want that to happen.
No, and here, if I can just, I want to take over from where Mr. Bhargav said. It is, you see, coming from a working class party, I can tell you with all assurance, it's not in the interest of the working class to destroy their place of work.
Never.
It is not in the interest of the working class to go on strike either, because I mean, the owners and the managers can survive, but the workers cannot. So it's only when a desperate situation comes. Now the point is, why has that desperate situation come? Now, instead of giving these names of urban nationalism, is there anything of a nature that has been heard about caste abuses going on there? Could that be a factor instead of left extremism? Was it a caste abuse?
Actually, the supervisor concerned and the worker concerned were both of the same caste. Both were Dalits.
Anyway, the state government should
Is it then a case of a clash of expectations? The economy is tough, times are tough, you've got managements which are under pressure on improving cost competitiveness. They want to reduce costs in whatever legitimate way they can. Expectations of the working class are rising. How will the two go hand in hand? And what happened at Maruti, is there a fear that it could happen elsewhere? How do we prevent that? We'll ask this question to our panel when we return on the other side of a very quick break. Stay tuned, we're back in a moment. For an economy that wants to be globally competitive, India has extremely rigid labor laws. There is pressure on companies to ensure that they can grow, be more competitive globally. More and more companies are hiring contract workers. Contract workers don't get the same sort of facilities that permanent workers do. Expectations are rising. Because times are tough, those expectations aren't being met. Is this, therefore, Mr. Godrej, grounds then for a possible unrest between, where the workers feel that managements are growing, companies are growing, but that growth story is not reaching them?
No, I don't agree with that statement. First of all, I think in most parts of the country, the workers are growing as well as the companies are growing, as well as the companies are growing. They're doing very well. In many cases, there is very good cooperation between workers and management to improve productivity. I think we should be careful to say that only a small percentage of workers are permanent employees in companies, because manufacturing in India today employs a very small part of our total workforce. Manufacturing is only 16% of our GDP. So, and the workers employed are even less, because in agriculture and in some of the services, productivity levels are much lower.
So, but there is an assessment here which says in the Manesar, Gurgaon, Faridabad, Ghaziabad, Noida belt, in all the factories, only 15% of the total workforce is actually employed. The rest of them are all on contract.
So that might be. Now, our labor laws need to provide flexibility, because labor requirement does go up and down. In some cases, flexibility will be better. also, if management needs to reduce the workforce for whatever reason, there must be an ability to do so, but the compensation to be paid should be better than what we have in our laws today. The flexibility should be with management. Now, for example, where factories need to be closed down for whatever reason, then management and workers do get together and come to a voluntary retirement scheme, in some cases for all the employees.
But Mr. Surjewala must answer that, given the fact that companies need to be flexible, labor laws need to be less rigid. Your government, sir, has made no forward movement in making labor laws rigid, therefore pushing companies towards contract labor, which naturally doesn't enjoy the same sort of employment benefits as regular employment.
Rahul, this is not state specific. You know, there are 43 national labor laws which vary in their reach, which vary in terms of where they are being applied,
Okay.
as also the whole gambit of or whole umbrella of applicability of those laws. The problem really is that in the 21st century, the processes have changed. The nature of industry has also changed. The nature of unionism has also, their aspirations have also changed rightfully, and the nature of industrialists have also changed. I think we need to revisit some of those labor laws, make them more simplistic, and as Mr. Godrej was pointing out, and rightfully so, if an industry is cyclical, if they want more and less labor at a particular point of time, why not?
Because, Mr. Yechuri, the labor unions will be up in arms. Your parties will oppose this. We'll never allow this to go through.
But I'll just complete my sentence. But in case a person from a labor has to go out, you have to ensure that he would have a window of 3, 4, 5 months to sustain himself or herself. That's about all. So maybe we need to, and I think Prime Minister has already announced a body, a working group. We need to revisit our labor laws to ensure that an ideal mix is found
It's a political hot potato. No government would bite the bullet, sir.
Listen. 20 years of reform. For 20 years, we have been hearing today's Prime Minister, then as Finance Minister, announce what he called the safety net. Where is that? Have you ever, from the industry, ever raised that issue? Where is that safety net that you talked about for 20 years? What Mr. Surjewala is saying is absolutely correct. Very often, people say that, oh, China has a hire and fire policy, why are you not applying? So we went there to study why. I mean, what is that policy? There is an insurance taken by the employer for the potential unemployment of the person he is employing. In case, like Mr. Surjewala says, that he goes out of work because of the cyclical nature of production, for that period, there's an insurance that covers his security. Now, have you ever talked of all these things rather than saying, I just want to hire and fire? No, without talking of this so-called great security net that has been talking about. How can you bring about any
let
change?
Chandrajit Banerjee and Surinder Kapoor respond to that. I'll start with Mr. Kapoor. The fact that industry wants the flexibility to fire people, but then isn't prepared to make good its own commitment in ensuring that workers at least have some sort of a safety net, sir.
First of all, let me state, no industry wants a hire and fire rule. I don't think that's what we're looking for. We're looking for flexibility in being able to have people, whether you call it on contract, casual, temporary, so that we can withstand the changes in the market.
As we come to the concluding part of this broadcast, I want to ask all our panelists what can be done from now by industry, by workers and by government to ensure that what happened at Maruti never gets repeated. I begin by asking that question to Dr. Kapoor.
Well, you know, let me share with all of you my current experience in Germany, where we've got a large workforce of almost 1,300 people. One of the things I've noticed in Germany is that the people who are leading the labor side, meaning the unions, the workers' council, they all go through a tremendous education and training program of how to be leaders. One of the problems that we've experienced now with this Maruti incident is, frankly, all of these are very young people who've just been working for a few years, and all of a sudden they become leaders. They don't know how to be leaders. They don't know how, they don't understand what unions really mean. What is their responsibility? What are they accountable for? They just come in and discuss and argue about a case of higher wages, not understanding the implication of not only higher wages, but what they're supposed to contribute to in terms of quality, in terms of skill development, in terms of productivity. So I think there's really a lack of that in this country. Unfortunately, the political parties that are affiliated with the trade unions here, I don't believe us putting enough emphasis in this area. They can come and gather crowds, become their leader, but then what? Okay, it should not be that the grievances which really need to be resolved immediately. There should be a methodology, and people must understand that they can't take the law into their own hands.
That's a strong point you're making, Mr. Surjewala. What will your government do to ensure, there's so much industry, and there's a fear that if this continues, industry will flee. Mr. Narendra Modi is already laying out the red carpet. There's talk of how Gujarat will become the next automotive hub. How do you ensure
the saffron carpet, not the red carpet.
The saffron carpet. How do you ensure that industry does not begin panicking?
Rahul, first of all, just one point I want to clarify. The whole genesis in a section of the media that is being projected is that the strife took place, or the incident at Maruti took place, on account of some labor management friction or salary issues. I think that's one thing we should nip the evil in the bud. Maruti in Haryana does pay according to the state government, and I speak with a sense of responsibility. Their labor management practices have been among the best in the state, and they are among the best paymasters in the state. Having said that, what we need to do is the larger picture for the entire country, not for a state or industry or a region specific. There could be solutions which are region or industry specific. Number one, we need to have a fresh look at our labor laws. I had never said that you need to hire or fire. Neither would Mr. Godrej ever agree with that. Yes, but a flexibility to retrench and to recruit with some amount of a social security net is one thing that the country as a whole, irrespective of political spectrum, need to rise along with the industry and workers and look at too. We also need to give a fresh look to the internal institutional mechanisms within the industry. Right now, government is the arbiter under the 43 odd national labor laws, and the management and the labor will work or will go to the government, okay, please solve this problem. I think government must become a facilitator rather than an arbitrator. And there should be institutional mechanism that the industry and the labor unions must create within themselves, voluntarily as also statutorily, so that we can move forward. These are two major things. And three, we need to have, when we say, okay, it's a contract labor vis-a-vis regular labor war, no. And I think he's absolutely right when he points out, I am engaged for 20 years in an industry. You are engaged tomorrow. Why should there be pay parity? Intersect the two. I must be paid better for my skills. So there would always be some distinction. Yeah, I'm coming to that, sir. You can give the same benefit to a contract laborer, but the pay can never be the same.
Okay.
But a contract labor ultimately must merge into, depending on his skill, his track record and his capacity as a regular labor, that perhaps is the way forward.
Mr. Godrej, India is in any case struggling to attract manufacturing investment. Has the incident at Manesar impacted global perception about the possibility of safely investing in India, and how much of a concern is that for us?
I would say yes, it has negatively affected the perception of India, just as some other things like retrospective amendments, GAR has negatively affected the perception of India from an investment point of view. And I think we should move very clearly on all fronts to change this perception, because India has the opportunity to grow at 9%. We need to bring in reforms. We need to bring in the goods and services tax. We need to overcome these negative perceptions. And I feel we should move on all these fronts to ensure that we can get back on track to a reasonable growth rate of 8 to 9%, where all our population could benefit from that. And inclusive growth is very important to my mind. Growth should be the priority, but inclusive growth should be given a lot of stress, because inclusive growth can help faster growth if done properly.
Mr. Yechuri.
All studies have shown inclusive growth has a great contribution for the efficiency and productivity mainly. I mean, it contributes to the growth. But the question is, how are we going to achieve this inclusion? There, I think the industry will also have to partner. It's not only the job of the not only the job of the government or the politicians. So, I mean, let us say, for instance, we have been arguing for labor situation itself. We have been arguing for a long time, and the unions associated with us, and I know a number of industrialists who come privately and say, please set up your union, at least we can talk politically to you and settle the matter. But we have been saying, why don't we move towards having one industry, one union? Then what you are talking of in terms of the leadership quality of the unions will emerge, whereby you will have a proper collective bargaining which exists in the West. You are giving the German example.
And that exists there.
That exists there.
Mr.
That exists there. So we have to move towards in that direction in order to actually modernize our labor relations as well.
Mr.
Actually,
Manager,
in
a lot
Germany,
of the...
if I may just,
Yes,
in
please.
Germany, the unions will negotiate with the employers' association. The companies don't get involved.
You know, a lot of the literature that's being recovered from the jungles far away from New Delhi and Bombay talks about the spectre of urban Naxalism. And I must, as we conclude, come back to this. Because this is, as the disparity between the rich and the poor grows, this is troubled water in which the Naxals would wish to fish. What can industry do to ensure that we don't let them come close to our urban centers?
So I think we are, say, from the industry doing a lot on that, and we have a developmental council which has been set up, which works with them in terms of what to get a two-way trust as to what industry has been contributing to the society. So there are a lot of engagement factors that we have been doing, and doing very effectively in all the affected districts, and showing how we can bring them into the mainstream. So that's a track 2 work which is very strongly on from an industry association.
We began the show with Mr. Bhargav. We give him the last word. You know.
Well, okay. Firstly, I believe for this question you asked, how to prevent such things happening. I think the visible signs of disparities and the apparent ostentatious living and the widening standards of living need to be curtailed, not by law, but by voluntary action, by industry. And I think we all have a law. Disparities and the apparent ostentatious living and the widening standards of living need to be curtailed, not by law, but by voluntary action, by industry. And I think we all have a law. I can't see why managing directors of companies should get paid 30 crores and the worker gets paid 30,000 maybe. Why?
Not even that much.
Maybe not even that much. So that is one area which I think requires that this whole widening ostentatious should be curtailed. And I think it's something which, when you talk of CII, when you talk of industry, I think we have a responsibility to do this, because I think it is not something which the Indian economic and social conditions can sustain. It must be put down. I think we should have a social pressure against this. Secondly, to curtail any like this happening, it requires very effective policing in a state, intelligence and policing. Unfortunately, over the last 20, 25 years, the police force in most parts of India has become totally demoralized, corrupted, and people don't now take action. They watch what's happening till they get an order from somebody to do something, because they're afraid that at the first sign of something happening, some political parties will raise a demand, there will be a judicial inquiry, and they'll be in trouble. So what we have seen, that there is a general tendency, and I'm not talking of Maruti, I'm talking generally, of inaction unless there's some reason to act. And somebody has to give them a reason, right? That should happen. Thirdly, I think this whole question of what should be done to improve the conditions of labor, yes, I think flexibility is possible, even within the existing laws. You can call the guy a contract worker, but what is relevant is not the name which he has. It is how he's recruited, what he's paid, how he's treated. I call the guy a temporary worker and pay him the same thing as I pay a regular worker. I give him the same conditions of work. As if he was a starter in the company, he gets paid as a regular worker. He is a regular source of recruitment to regular things. That can be done within the existing laws, but certainly if the laws are made more flexible, that would be a good thing.
There's one question which all our viewers would have. Your products at Manesar were the best-selling products. There's a massive waiting queue already. People would be interested in knowing when can they expect their orders to come, and when will the plant be up and running?
We have a very clear statement on that we can only start production when we can ensure the safety of our managers, supervisors, and workers. because our workers, some sections of workers are also at risk. It's not as if only the managers are at risk.
So how will you know that you can now ensure their safety?
We have to judge what's happening.
Rahul, can I come in on that? One point.
Very quickly, I'm out of time.
Number one, Chief Minister and the government has already assured Maruti management that both for those who are going to depose as also any other HR management level people, that Maruti would require personal security, government is ready to provide, as also for the plant. And any other industry in the area that would require, government stands committed to providing them adequate security.
Only one sentence, sir. I please want you to seriously consider the term CTC that you use is not cost to company but contribution to company. Unless you change your mindset to that, a lot will depend upon that. So I want the industry to seriously consider
But we
that.
use that for managers also.
Yes, no, but for everybody.
I don't think it's used in the context you're thinking about.
Well, as Mr. Yachuri says, there are two Indias, the IPL India and the BPL India, and the gap between these two Indias is growing. And how we can bridge the gap, not just monetarily, but also in terms of trust, that will determine how fast India can grow.
Rahul, a large part of our Gurgaon workers own houses, own their own motor vehicles, send their children to the DPS. That's not BPL, surely.
And which is why it's most concerning that if despite all of this, an incident of this nature can happen at Maruti.
It has happened because it's not part of what the minister said, normal industrial relations. It is something more than that. It doesn't make sense what's happened. As Mr. Yachuri said, I totally agree with the workers.
Mr. Rudy doesn't like this, but extreme left-wing thoughts and ideologies.
Genuine workers do not do such things.
Genuine workers don't do this. This is indeed something where the debate can go on a lot for everybody to reflect on, for workers, for employees, for management, and for government. To all my guests for joining me, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Center Stage, brought to you by